All right, Week 16 NFL Power Rankings, and this week we're going to start incorporating something a little different as we get towards the end. I'll include who the team beat, the winning streak or losing streak that they're on, as well as who they play this upcoming week and the spread in that game. As we get to the last couple games, this will become important as they face their final matches. So Week 16, as always, I do 7 from the AFC, 7 from the NFC in my top 14. Now, there's been a little bit of criticism from some people in the comments on how I do this. This is going to start making sense now why I do this as we get into the last 3 weeks. You'll see how critical this is in my rankings, how it works. As always, the NFC is a little bit stronger overall this year's 10 teams with a 500 or better record. Only 7 teams in the AFC. The AFC is becoming very clear who's going to make the playoffs because of those 7 teams. But there are some teams hovering right there at 6 and 8 that could make an impact. We'll see over these last couple weeks how that will go as we end the season. All right, here's the standings. I always give this before the predictions. You can see there on the left, the Chargers have an 8-6 record, but several teams right there, 6 and 8. Indianapolis, Miami, and Cincinnati, all kind of still in the hunt. Everybody below them, all eliminated. Over on the NFC, a lot of teams with 10 wins already. 12 and 2, three-way tie at the top. And then you've got 7 and 7 all the way down to number 10. So all those teams with at least a 500 record. The Niners, the Cowboys still at 6 and 8. And then teams there at the bottom are eliminated. The Bears, the Panthers, and the Giants. Each week I give who my biggest risers are, my farthest fallers. Really, I just overdid the Seahawks. I shouldn't have had them quite so high in the rankings. So when they lost the divisional lead, they dropped out of the playoffs, and now they lost 6 spots. And the Jets, with their win, rise up 4 spots as they head into the final 3 games. Not really going to impact them too much, but they are the biggest riser this week. All right, keeping down the last spot, the Giants lost to the Ravens in Week 15. Their losing streak is now at 9. They are a 10-point underdog to the Falcons in Week 16, so the losing may continue there. The Raiders will hold down their spot at 31 as well. They lost to the Falcons in Week 15. Their losing streak is now at 10. They are a point favorite against the Jaguars in Week 16. That one kind of surprised me a little bit, but those two will be battling for one of the highest picks in the draft. Titans lost to the Bengals in Week 15. Their losing streak is at 3 now. They are a 4.5-point underdog to the Colts in Week 16. The Jaguars lost to the Jets in Week 15 after winning in Week 14. They are a point underdog to the Raiders in Week 16. After their loss, I had to drop them down 3 spots. The Panthers lost to the Cowboys in Week 15. Their losing streak is now at 4. They're a 4-point underdog to the Cardinals in Week 16. Bears fans everywhere are rooting for them to lose out so they can have a high second-round pick for the Panthers. 5 is fine there, but a few more spots down would be nice. Patriots lost to the Cardinals in Week 15. Their losing streak is also extended to 4 games. They're a whopping 14-point underdog to the Bills in Week 16. All right, the Browns lost to the Chiefs in Week 15, running their losing streak to 3 games. They're a 7-point underdog to the Bengals in Week 16. The Jets are going to jump up 4 spots, as you saw earlier, by beating the Jaguars in Week 15, snapping their losing streak. They're a 3.5-point underdog to the Rams in Week 16. So they're up 4 spots, but not looking good moving forward. All right, the Bears lost to the Vikings in Week 15, running their losing streak to an impressive 9 games. Ryan Poles, as a GM, now owns the 2 longest losing streaks in Chicago Bears' 105-year history. The Bears are a 6.5-point underdog against the Lions in Week 16. They've got a tough schedule to end the season. Saints lost to the Commanders in Week 15 after they won in Week 14. They're a huge 13.5-point underdog to the Packers in Week 16. All right, the Dolphins are going to drop a few spots after losing to the Texans in Week 15. They're still in the playoff hunt and are favored to beat the 49ers by 1.5 in Week 16. Cowboys also won in Week 15. They beat the Panthers. All these teams are technically in the playoff hunt still, but one went away from looking forward to the draft and losing out. They'll go into Week 16 as a 4-point underdog to the Buccaneers. The Niners lost to the Rams in Week 15. They had a mini-bye after playing on Thursday last week to try to figure out the dysfunction that's happening in their team. They're a 1.5 underdog to the Dolphins in Week 16. So the Dolphins I have ranked lower, but they are favored to win that game. All right, the Colts lost to the Broncos in a game filled with mental mistakes. They have a chance to stay in the playoff hunt in Week 16 as they're a 4.5-point favorite against the Titans this week. The Bengals beat the Titans in Week 15, and now they're on a 2-game winning streak. Winning at the right time is very critical. They're favorites heading into Week 16 over the Browns by 7 points. So 7-point favorite over the Browns this week. Falcons beat the Raiders in Week 15 and now sit at an even 7-7. They get a favorable matchup in Week 16 as they're 10-point favorites against the Giants. The Cardinals are also 7-7 after beating the Patriots in Week 15. This is a must-win week with their remaining schedule as they're favored over the Panthers by 4 points in Week 16. To round out the non-playoff teams, the Seahawks lost the divisional lead as they lost to the Packers in Week 15. Their road doesn't get any easier in Week 16 as they're 3-point underdogs to the Vikings. So it's going to be a tough path for them. All right, now as I said, this becomes more visible why 7 from the AFC, 7 from the NFC, because here's the playoff picture now. The playoff teams, the Rams jump in as the West divisional leader, but the NFC West will likely come down to the last game of the last week of Week 18. The Rams are getting hot at the right time as they've now won 3 in a row and are favored in Week 16 to beat the Jets by 3.5 points. Each game in the NFC West is going to become very critical down the stretch. All right, I've been up and down on the Commanders all year. They've been hot and cold, though, at different points. The Commanders beat the Saints in Week 15, but they aren't passing the eye test to me right now. They've won 2 in a row, but don't have the easiest path to the playoffs as they come down the stretch. This week, they're underdogs to the Eagles by 3 points. It's going to be interesting. If there's a 10-win team that doesn't make the playoffs this year from the NFC, it could happen. The Texans beat the Dolphins in Week 15 and clinched the division in the process. They've won 2 in a row, and surprisingly, they're the favorites by 2.5 points this week as they take on the Chiefs. I was surprised to see that they're favorites against the Chiefs, especially with how the Texans have been playing. They haven't been playing the best ball right now, but they've won 2 in a row, so we'll see how that matchup goes. Chargers dropped down a few spots as they lost to the Buccaneers in Week 15. They've now lost 2 in a row and dropped to 3rd place in their division. They still hold a wild card spot in the playoffs, but they need to finish strong to stay in. They're favorites heading into Week 16 by 3 points over the number 2 spot Broncos in their division. Interesting that they're the favorites over the Broncos. So some of these matchups, Vegas knows some things we don't always know. Had to jump the Buccaneers up a few spots as they beat the Chargers in Week 15. That was a huge win as they run their winning streak up to 4 games and maintain a divisional lead with just 3 weeks left. Their destiny is in their own hands as they're favorites against the Cowboys by 4 in Week 16. I've been calling for a couple weeks that the Buccaneers will end up winning that division, though, and they're pulling to fruition. They're showing what everyone kind of saw. Everyone kind of saw that. It wasn't just me that saw it, but the Buccaneers are getting hot at the right time. All right, the Steelers got a dose of humility in Week 15 as they lost to the Eagles. They've still locked in a playoff spot at 10-4, but have some work to do to win the division. The division might come down to this week's game as they're underdogs to the Ravens by 6 points. This is one of the week's best games to watch for me. I'm excited for that one. All right, the Packers. Everyone knows how hard it is for me to raise the Packers up in the rankings, but they are earning it. A week after losing, the Packers right the ship and beat the Seahawks in Week 15, right when the Seahawks were looking hot too. They're not likely to win the division at this point, but are basically a win away from locking in a playoff spot as a wildcard team. They should be able to get the job done this week as they're favorites over the Saints by 13.5 whopping points. All right, the Broncos, the fight they showed in their Week 15 game as they were down against the Colts was impressive to show some fight and ability to overcome adversity to win handily. The Broncos have now won 4 in a row, and they're hot at the right time. I had to raise them up a few spots, but Vegas isn't giving them the same respect yet as they hold a game lead over the Chargers in the division and the playoff race, and Vegas has them as the 3-point underdog to the Chargers. Sounds like some motivational material for me if I'm part of the Broncos. Ravens beat the Giants in Week 15 and can clinch a playoff spot in Week 16 with their 10th win. It won't be easy as they take on the division-leading Steelers, but Vegas seems to think they hold the edge as they're a 6-point favorite in that matchup. All right, the Vikings handled the Bears easily in Week 15 and now tied for the best record in the NFC with just 3 weeks left to play. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had the Vikings, maybe Vikings fans did, at 12-12 at this point in the season with just 3 weeks to go. That shows how critical an elite head coach and an elite GM mean to a team. All the right moves, and then coach them up right on the field. The Vikings have won 7 in a row and head into Week 16 as a 3-point favorite over the Seahawks this week. Chiefs finally won a game that wasn't last-second squeaker or depending on the refs as they toppled the Browns in Week 15. They hold the best record in football, but I still have them down at number 4 because it hasn't been convincing at all. Vegas seems to feel the same way as I do, as they have the Chiefs as underdogs to the Texans by 2.5 points. Now, I think they'll beat the Texans, but it's interesting that Vegas has them as underdogs to them. The Eagles have a leading 10-game winning streak as they beat the Steelers in Week 15. They'll clinch the division with any win, but it could be more of a statement if they do it this week as they face the Commanders, who they're 3-point favorites this week over. All right, number 2, I'm going to bump the Lions down one spot after they lost their league's longest winning streak. Lost to the Bills this week, dropping them into a 3-way tie with the Vikings and Eagles for the best record in the NFC. They still hold the league's best point differential at 177 points as they've dominated teams all year. However, they'll face the Bears as a 6.5-point favorite in Week 16, but they took the entire game to beat the Bears by just 3 on Thanksgiving, and the Lions now lost David Montgomery, Aleem McNeil, and Carlton Davis this week to go along with the league's longest injury list. The Lions finally have the league's most dominant team, and they might just be stopped by injuries on their path to the playoffs. The Bills beating the Lions showed me all I need to know to crown them as the league's best team. Let me pause this and take it back so you guys can look at that while I finish with the Bills. All right, they're just 13-3 compared to 4 teams with better records than them, but they're no more potent offense in the league than the Bills right now. Headed by MVP Josh Allen, he's pretty much locked up the MVP race at this point. They head into Week 16 as a heavy favorite by 14 points over the division rival Patriots. They should hold on to the top spot the rest of the season with their schedule. I think the Bills are going to head into the playoffs as a very, very tough task for anybody to face them. All right, so if you haven't by now, please hit the like button, subscribe. New videos out each Tuesday for power rankings, each Wednesday for the predictions. It's going to be fun as we come right down to the wire here. Let me know who your teams are. Let me know who you think is going to make the playoffs, though, because right now there will be a surprise team that wins the rest of the way out, and some team is going to lose a game they shouldn't lose, and they're going to end up getting upset and being left out of the playoffs. The NFC is going to be interesting to see if there is a 10-game team that gets left out of the playoffs, though. It could happen this year, so we'll see if it does. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Good luck to your teams this week, and we'll see you next week.